Hello everybody, welcome back. So this week we're going to be looking at these little Chinese hand cranks. If you want to add a hand crank onto a vintage spoke-wheeled machine, the original hand cranks, at least for singers, and you know others are very hard to find too, are extremely expensive and they're hard to find, but these aren't. These are little import jobs. They're about a little over $20. You can find them anywhere online, and they work, but they're really feel chintzy, I guess, when you're using them, because there's a lot of play, you know, and things like that. So I just got done putting back together a really cute little green 66, and I'll show you that in a minute, but I'm going to be doing a hand crank for it. So I wanted to show you basically how I take it apart, because I have one. It's actually over there already, green. But I want to show you how I take these apart, and then we'll figure out how to get them so they're not quite as rattly. I have a few ideas, but I haven't actually tried it yet, so we will take it one step at a time. So I do paint mine. If you're not going to paint yours, you don't need to take it apart as entirely as I am. But the first thing I'm going to do is take off these two screws. This is just a little metal plate. It bends very easily, as you can kind of see there. Actually, the one that I had over that I painted already, it was a little bit bent, so I at one point took some pliers and tried to straighten it out, and I will show you in a minute. So these are just some little Phillips head screws here. Let me get one of my little trays. These things, like dollar store, they're called activity trays. They're usually over with the kids' art supplies. They are so darn handy for just putting all kinds of things in, and little screws and things in their own little compartments, you know. Anyway, take off this little screw. Okay. And then this plate comes off. All right. So I'm going to put this, because this is a paintable part. I'll put it up here. Okay. Now inside, you know, I'm going to start out here. Let me switch out my bit to something bigger. But what we want to look at while I'm taking it apart is what feels chintzy, okay? Right now, I can tell you that this area in here is bad. So I'm going to have to put something over this pin or do something else so that this is not rattling as much that way. Also, you see how this whole gear kind of wobbles back and forth? I don't really like that. And if you can see here, if I can twist this screw in, well, it takes some of the wobble out, but it's still a little wobbly, okay? So I think that there's a point where you just can't screw this in any further. And just looking at it, it almost is like it needs a little bearing or something. But I'm going to try to figure out a way to do all this with just, you know, supplies I have on hand. This does not come off down here, but up, no, I guess this one doesn't. I had another one that I could unscrew. This hand knob is what it is. It's just pounded in there, and I don't want to saw that off. So this is going to stay the way it is. Down here, this is a pin, and I'm going to tap that pin out after I pull this gear off. So let me go ahead and take off the gear. But remembering that this is one of those places that would be nice if it was a little bit less bumpy. So looking at it, I'm thinking, well, maybe I could put some kind of a little spring-loaded screw washer down here, kind of like they have in some of the old bobbin winders. That might be a good thing to put between this plate and this plate, okay? Keep a little tension there. That might work. And the same thing up here. That might work too. So let me set that big screw. Looks like this. Okay. Now I'm going to tap this little pin out right there because I need to be able to get inside there. Okay, I was able to drive it out. So this is the little pin. This is the pin that this handle goes around. So you can kind of see all of that play, okay? I'm going to try to come up with something to take up some of that slack in there too. So let me set this aside. This is something that needs to get stripped and painted. This stays here. And then this is one last piece that has a lot of play. So I'm going to take it off. And I am going to need to make a run to a hardware store because, let me show you here. Okay, here's this gear that goes in there. This is the big screw that goes in it. If I compare these two, the longer one is the one that goes in this little gear. The shorter one goes in the bigger one, okay? But it looks to me like they're the same diameter up here in the big shoulders. So I'm thinking, you know, just thinking out loud here, if I can find some kind of a spring-loaded washer that has a diameter big enough to go through here, I think that will work. So now it's disassembled. When I'm going to paint them, these parts here, I stripped down on here. Actually, there's a piece of rubber. I'm going to pull that off. And this comes off with a little Phillips head screw. It's just a little spring. It's a little blade. And this can be tapped off. Hey, welcome back over here to another day. And I've been playing, well, we have been playing. My husband actually helped me hammer out a couple things. Trying to figure out how to improve these, because they have play, you know? So let me tell you what I have done and what I have learned. Let me take this part off here first. I got some nylon washers at Lowe's because I couldn't find a metal one that was the right sizes. And there is usually quite a bit of play and rattle in this gear. And what I found is if you're going to put a washer in either down in this area or up here to keep it from rattling, it's going to tighten up on itself. I have a little bit of lithium grease in there. So unfortunately, in this area up here, what I have found through trial and error is that with this screw at least, it is what it is. But for this handle, I'm going to show you, see how it's a little bit more open? What we actually did, I say we because it was him, is take the handle, this is the before, okay, open it up with a punch and hammer a little bit, and then I have some of this 3/32 inch, or 3/16 inch outside diameter little tube. Okay, opened it up enough to slide this, a little piece of this inside of it. Okay, and then close it up. And then the pin that goes through here that rattles a whole bunch, all right, with that little piece of tubing in there. You can see it's in there now. It ends up opening this a little bit, but it keeps it really solid. The other thing is up here in this little gear, what I did, because it usually rattled quite a bit too, is in this little area where the head of this screw goes. Okay, I have one of my little washers, and what those are these. That's the size, okay? If you're looking for them, that's the size. I got them at Lowe's. And putting that washer up here in the head, it's sized so it's right underneath the little metal head, and it's going to go in there, and that's going to help, you know, eliminate a little bit of play in there. So those are my three things. Putting a little bit of grease, lithium grease is what I use. I used to use this, you know, underneath the gear down there, so where it's metal on metal, because it is just a rough cast metal on metal, it's not as bad. Okay, using the washer to take a little bit of the play out of this piece, and opening this up, putting the little rubber tube in there. Okay, so I think that that's going to move pretty freely. So now that all of that is done on my little guinea pig one here, I'm going to put this little piece back on with its screws so I don't lose it. I'm going to go ahead and put back together the one for my machine in the exact same way. And so let me go ahead and get that put together, and then we'll put it onto the machine. Go ahead. Okay, so this is just opening up that little eyelet in the handle a little bit so we can put the little hose inside of it. So I'm going to cut a little piece of hose to fit in there. And here is the little pin to make sure that the little pin's going to fit. It's a really tight fit for the pin to go through this. It's just barely the right size. So now I'm stretching out the little piece of hose that's inside of there so that the little pin will go through it easier. And I am holding the camera well. Let's see if we can get the pin to go through. Okay, so now the pin's going to be able to go through that little tube. We can't put it in yet because we have to put it through when it's being slid through the bracket. Okay, I'm just going to line up the holes with a smaller punch. Pull that out and see if we can put the pin back in and tap that in. Okay, so now that is in. This is really secure. I need to put some touch-up paint right here. When I was drying it, I set it like this to dry. Unfortunately, that's the exposed part. So I'm just going to touch that up after, you know, it's all set. So I'm going to go ahead and finish putting it together. I need to put a little bit of my grease back here because that is metal on metal and it's, you know, cast, so it's a little bit rough, and it's going to be this part up against it. So let me just get that put together, and there's a long shouldered screw that's going to go through there. And okay, I got it back together, and there's one thing I want to point out on both of these. You can be going along and then all of a sudden it wants to kind of bind up and slow down. You have to crank your way through it again. And from what I've been able to tell, it's because these teeth are not cut perfectly. And it seems like you can be going along really well, but there'll come a point where some of these teeth might not mesh up exactly with some of these teeth, and it slows it down. And that's just because of the shape of the teeth, you know. It was the same on this one that I hadn't stripped down and painted as this one. So I don't think it's the paint that has anything to do with it. It's just, you know, this is not fine craftsmanship. The threads in these holes is not perfect and things like that. But, you know, it is what it is. And it's pretty much the best we can do right now. But, like, if you can see, I'm cranking along, and then there's going to come a point where it feels a little bit rough. What I am hoping is that the more it is used, the more those uneven spaces might, work themselves together, or maybe not. Yeah, I'm going to have to play with the tension just a little bit more because, let me show you, it's kind of schizophrenic, So it is a brand new needle. I might wind another bobbin because the bobbin I'm using is an older one, and just give it a shot. Sometimes when you just do new things, it works. Okay, so I'm just going to wind enough on this bobbin that I'll have enough to play with. I'm not going to fill it completely up. I think that is good. So I'm going to go ahead and put the clutch back in, pop this off, lift this up so it's not engaged with the wheel anymore, and go ahead and load it back into my bobbin case. Okay, I've got my new bobbin, new thread in here. See if I can move this so you can see. And I think that's what it was. I think that bobbin was messed up because now she seems to be cooking along just fine. So I would suggest that. Sometimes it's just bad, Let's see, other suggestions. Make sure that you have your bobbin through all of the proper little springs and nooks and crannies in your bobbin case. That's always a good one. Make sure that you're threading your needle from the right direction, that you have your needle in, all the way. Make sure this isn't kajingered up somehow. Well, I don't know what it was exactly, but I can tell you what I ended up doing. Pulling out the bobbin case below, repolishing everything, putting it back, pulling out the entire tension mechanism, repolishing, putting it back, and now it works. So I am not too sure exactly what part was upset with me because it didn't feel like it was as clean as it needed to be or something like that. But at this point, she's working really well. So, we're going to call that good. Very happy, nice straight little stitches. I am going to go ahead, give her a final little polish down after all of my greasy fingers have been on her, and put her in the camera booth.